Good morning, everyone. I have some good news for you all. Normally these presentations we do, they're about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and we go through a history of ransomware and tell you about all the scary things that are out there. Given it's a 15-minute presentation, I'm going to skip all of that stuff. I'm going to assume that you all know how scary it is. I am going to mention one or two statistics, okay, though, before I start to just highlight what we're talking about. 11 seconds. Why has it got 11 seconds on the screen? Every 11 seconds, a company is hit by ransomware. That is how big the problem is. Every 11 seconds, another company is wiped out by ransomware. But it's not just wiped out. 80% of ransomware attacks include the threat to leak exfiltrated data. So it's not just we're going to hold your data hostage anymore. It's not just we're going to encrypt your files, okay? It is very much we are going to steal your files, then we're going to encrypt your files. As far as I'm concerned, nowadays, the encryption part is only a way of attracting attention. It's just their way of saying, hey, we're in. One of my, as you mentioned, I've worked in IT for 20 years, but the last ransomware attack, and I worked for an IT company for 18 of those years, but the last ransomware attack I was involved in the cleanup of had something that I'd never seen before, which was the ransom note that was left behind. What it said was not just pay us Bitcoin and we'll give you a decryption key. It was, we have uploaded 1.3 terabytes of your data. If you don't pay us on this date at this time, we are going to start releasing it. That is the bit that terrified that customer. Okay, it wasn't the 2 days of disruption or downtime while we got them restored from backups. It was the thought that their data was out there. But the other point about this is the data will not be credibly destroyed. Okay, so even if you pay the ransom, you go, look, I can't take the risk of this information, this data getting into the wrong hands. I'm just going to pay the ransom. How do you know they're going to destroy it? You're dealing with criminals. You're dealing with gangs. Okay, so even if they say, oh yes, we just destroyed your data, how do you know they have? Which leads you on to the next point, which is double dipping is common. So even if you do pay and they say, yes, we've destroyed your data, very often you'll get contact 6 months, 8 months, a year down the line saying, hey, by the way, we didn't actually delete your data. We want more money. Okay, so double dipping is common. Now, the question of how we solve this problem, okay, I think we all accept or know that there is a problem there. It is important to understand that malware is just software. Okay, ransomware is just software. It's written in the same programming languages that all of the software you use on a daily basis is. If you actually decompile ransomware, you will find snippets from places like Stack Overflow. Perfectly legitimate code, but it's legitimate code that's used in illegitimate ways. Now, historically, this is how we tried to solve the problem, okay? Between antivirus, went on to threat hunters, EDRs, MDRs, XDRs, anything with DNR in the title, basically detection and response, okay? So trying to identify those bad things and hopefully shut them down. But there's a problem with that. It has to get it right 100% of the time. If you're depending on decisions, something making decisions on your behalf, it has to get it right 100% of the time. It's no good at being right 99.99% of the time, because that 0.01% of the time is when you're going to get hit and when you're going to be wiped out. So we have mentioned already in the speaking what is zero trust. There's a few different definitions of it, but basically only grant access where access is required is a pretty good way of summing it up in a line. And it's least privilege, okay? The concept of the principle of least privilege. I want to introduce this concept, okay? So all those other tools, all those other solutions I mentioned earlier, they live over on the left-hand side here, those detection tools, okay? So whether it be antivirus or anti-phishing or threat hunters or EDRs or MDRs, as I said, anything with a DNR in the title, they are all detection, okay? They are all response, okay? Another very important part of any cybersecurity strategy is education, okay? It is the human aspect. Okay, try and teach the people to do the right things, because realistically they are the weakest link in the chain. But the problem is, no matter how well you train her, Doris is always going to click on that link. I hate to pick on Doris, but she is always going to click on that link. Okay, and what do you do when that happens? Now, this side of the triangle is where fundamentally we come in, where ThreatLocker comes in, which is on the control side. Now, can anyone tell me the most effective way to thwart a phishing attack? How do you stop a phishing attack from impacting you? It's very simple, two-factor authentication. You have two-factor authentication in place, doesn't matter if your credentials get phished, okay? That is a control. Dual-factor authentication is a control. Firewalls are a control, okay? They're a static list of rules. What we offer, and I'll speak through this in a moment, but what we offer is more controls, okay? What can run, what can't run, what things can do when they are running. So that's where ThreatLocker comes in. Now we see lots of businesses, lots of organization with lots of detection tools, okay? Very often 2, 3, 4 different layers of detection. But the problem is they're all trying to detect the same threats. They're all looking for the same bad things, and very often they're falling over each other trying to stop them. So, as I said, where we come into it is, first and foremost, whitelisting, allow listing, default deny, whatever you want to call it. But allow what needs to run, and block everything else. Okay, not just the bad things, everything else. And the everything is really important. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. First thing that will be run if a network gets compromised, IP scanners. So whether it be advanced IP scanners, advanced IP scanner or Angry IP, that is the first thing that they will run when they get in, because they want to get a picture of the environment. They want to see what's there. Remote access tools, TeamViewer. Does anybody here truly know how many different remote access tools or what the percentage of remote access tools are in play in your environments? I went through this with a customer not too long ago, and they had a customer of theirs. The environment was about 170 machines, okay? We found 6 different remote access tools running in that environment. Not just sitting there, running, okay? They had AnyDesk, they had TeamViewer, they'd log me in, they had, get this, the previous MSP's remote access tool was still running on 2 of the machines in that environment. In total, 33 of those machines, right, nearly 20% of the machines were running TeamViewer. That company did not use TeamViewer. There was no legitimate reason for TeamViewer to be on all those machines. I mean, it probably got installed because some third party once upon a time needed remote access, installed TeamViewer, and it sat there forever, okay, as a potential way into the network. And the problem is, because it's something that the company didn't authorize, they didn't set up, they have no control over it. So those TeamViewers, how many of them are set for unattended access? Who knows? Have people logged in using personal email addresses? Who knows? Have they used that password from that personal email address on a different site that's subsequently being compromised? Who knows? Okay? Adding control, blocking everything that hasn't been explicitly allowed is very much the way to go. One other example, by the way, one thing we've seen a bit of a proliferation of recently is the usage of backup tools, packaged backup tools for data exfiltration. Okay, so you can package up Veeam, you can package up things like Acronis, okay, with all the settings it needs. Now again, your AV or EDR isn't going to stop that because it's just a backup utility. But can that backup utility be used for data exfiltration? Absolutely it can. So again, block everything that isn't required. How do we do that? How do we achieve that? It sounds scary, it sounds difficult. It's not, okay? We deploy an agent in what we call learning mode. When it's in learning mode, it's not going to block anything. It's not going to stop anything. It's not going to interfere with anything, okay? It's literally just logging information, effectively. But what it does when it logs that information is it creates policies, creates a list of rules for all the software that needs to run in your environment. So you don't have to start from zero and figure out all the software you need. You can literally just let this learn, let it run, let it create a list of policies for you. Okay? It normally takes about 2 weeks, generally speaking. Updated applications. One of the problems historically with application whitelisting has always been the question of what happens when things update. And typically what happens when things update is they break, because your whitelisting will go, I know that file is called acrobat.exe, but it doesn't match my hash for acrobat.exe, so therefore it's not going to be allowed to run. Now the way we solve that is we have a database of almost 2,000 common applications, okay, that we track, monitor, and catalog when they update. So basically, if Adobe release an update for Acrobat, we're going to capture those files, those hashes, and add them to our built-in definitions. So what that means is you don't need to worry about updates breaking your software. Attacks that live off the land. If you get a chance, check out an organization or a website called LOLBAS, okay, Living Off the Land Binaries and Scripts. Really interesting. Question, does anybody here know what a rubber ducky is? Yes, we've got a few hands up. For those of you who think it's a duck that you squeeze and it goes quack, quack, it is not. It is a USB device. Okay, it looks like a perfectly normal USB key. When you plug it into a computer, though, it's not detected as storage. It's detected as a keyboard. Okay, and it's a keyboard that can type up to 1,000 words a minute. Okay, so basically, you plug this into a machine. It's very hard to stop because you can't stop your keyboard from detecting, your computer from detecting keyboards. Okay, now these particular rubber duckies I have programmed for data exfiltration. Okay, now data exfiltration sounds very exotic. It sounds very complicated. Typically, it is just a PowerShell command. This particular PowerShell command goes through your documents folder recursively and uploads everything it finds to Google Blob Storage. Very simple, very effective, very hard to stop. Okay, now we have this thing where we basically call it the Ducky Challenge, which is if anybody here thinks that their current cybersecurity solution will stop this from doing its thing, come talk to myself and my very tall colleague Josh at the booth. You can't miss him. We'll plug it into your computer. If you win, you get to keep the rubber ducky. If we win, we get to keep your data. Now, you all laugh, and you're all going, there's no way I'm going to let you plug that into my computer, okay? 3 times in the last 4 months, people have actually volunteered. They've come up with the expectation that their current cybersecurity solution will stop this, okay? 3 major EDRs they were using. Not one of them even registered anything was happening, and we got their data, okay? So as I said, you're more than welcome to volunteer and be the next victim and be the next person I talked about on my next speaking. By the way, has anyone ever seen one of these? Do we know what this is? If you're thinking it's an iPhone charging cable, technically you're right. It's also an OMG cable. Now, OMG cables are like rubber duckies on steroids, okay? What this has built into it is a wireless adapter, okay? So it broadcasts a wireless network that can be connected to remotely. It gives you a web interface that you can connect to, okay, and run remote commands. So the same commands that you can run with a rubber ducky, you can run through this remotely, whenever you feel like it. Okay, now we used this as part of a demonstration last week. By the way, I'm running out of time. And I basically rickrolled our CEO. Okay, he had this connected to his machine, and I basically just ran, Rick Astley's never going to give you up through PowerShell. But you get the idea. Point is, things like PowerShell, you need to control what they can do. Okay, so number one, stop things from talking to PowerShell. Okay, you don't need applications to be able to talk to PowerShell. Okay, everything that runs on your computer has access to everything that you do. And that's really important. That's why ransomware is as prevalent, as successful as it is. Once you have access to data, it has access to that data. Okay, so stop PowerShell from accessing your files and folders. Stop it from connecting or talking to the entire internet, okay? PowerShell doesn't need to access the entire internet. You don't want it to be able to go out and execute or download payloads or run remote code. Stop it from doing those things. Administrative privileges, okay? I'm gonna ask anybody here who doesn't have somebody on their network with local admin rights that shouldn't. Was that a double negative I just asked? Anyway, I'm assuming you all do. Take away those local admin rights. With this, you can set the things that need to elevate. Storage control, really interesting. Okay, so you can actually control which individual programs, which applications have access to your data. Okay, again, remember, everything you run has access to everything you have access to. If you can narrow that down to only let the programs that need access to your data have access to your data, you're going to restrict the potential for damage if something bad does get into an environment. Last but not least, biggest problem with network, okay? There is no network, as our colleague mentioned beforehand, okay? We're sharing the internet with some, quite frankly, dodgy people, okay? This guy. Point is, the internet is the network we all share, okay? So lock it down, stop everything connecting in that doesn't need to, okay? Dynamic ACLs are really important. So it's not just a static set of rules like a firewall, okay? You can actually control whether ports are open or not depending on what's connecting to them, okay? So it's really, really important. As I said, this is generally speaking what we're talking about. So allow listing, ring fencing, elevation, network access control, and storage control. 5 different components, but 5 different components, all of which offer that degree of control that a lot of organizations are missing. Have an iPhone app if you need to improve things while you're out and about. Okay, just to sum up, allow listing, extremely effective at stopping malicious software, even 0 days. Deployment and management are not difficult. Ring fencing stops exploitation of 0-day exploits. Okay, that's really important. Controlling what things can do is almost as important as controlling what can run. Overhead is less than an EDR. Okay, you don't have to respond to individual threats. You don't have to keep going, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. Just assume everything is going to be blocked. And dynamic ACLs allow you to stop servers from being accessed. 30,000 businesses use it currently. Fastest deployment we ever done is 1 hour. Okay, small and large companies alike. If you fancy a trip to Florida in February, we have our own event, Zero Trust World. Okay, very good event. And thank you very much. Sorry, I had to run a bit at the end, but thank you very much, people.